Well, thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you to all of you who have chosen to come spend this hour with me. Our session today is called From Stress to Strength, the Power of Sustainable Self-Care. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we will dive right in. So, like Victoria said, my name is Breanna, and I am coming to you from Ottawa. I have worked in the social services field in Ottawa for a really long time. I used to manage volunteers at the Ottawa Distress Center, used to work at victim services. I've worked in housing, treatment for youth with substance use disorders, you name it, I've probably done it. And now I own my own business called Talk Tools, where I teach workshops like this one about mental health, suicide intervention, psychological safety in the workplace. I am also a registered psychotherapist, and I have a private practice in Ottawa where I see individuals and couples for therapy. If we have any dog lovers in the room, this is my boy Bowser. He's a Bernese mountain dog. He absolutely loves the winter season. I think he comes alive when it gets cold and snows. And I'll apologize in advance if you hear him or see him at some point. One of the perks of working from home is that I get to have him around me, and he's a pretty good guard dog, so he will let us know if someone comes to the door or is outside. And a fun fact about me is that I love scuba diving. The last place I got to dive was off the coast of Vancouver this summer, which was really amazing. So let's talk about what we're here to cover today. I've got a lot for us to pack in the next 45 to 50 minutes. I am going to leave some time for a Q&A at the end. But please, throughout, if questions come up and you want to pop them in the chat, I have it open on my screen, so I'm happy to attend to that as we go. I'm also hoping that even though I can't see you and I can't see your names for confidentiality purposes either, I'm hoping that we can have still some interaction over the next hour via the chat. So if you could find the chat function on your screen, if it's available to you. I do have some questions I'll pose to you, and if you're comfortable answering, giving me an answer in the chat. Again, I can't see your name, so it will be confidential and anonymous, but it will help with some of our discussions. If you're not interested in participating in the chat, you just came here to sit back and listen for an hour, that's cool too. If you maybe want to reflect on some of the questions I'm going to ask you or make some notes to yourself, I'm totally okay with that. So we're going to first start off by defining mental health and stress. I think we maybe somewhat have an idea of what these things are, but if I asked you to define them, that's often a little bit harder than we think it is at face value. We'll talk about some warning signs that our bodies, our minds, our emotions give us. I think these are unique to everyone, but there are some common ones that we can see that indicate that we're in a state of stress and maybe could use some extra attention to our self-care. I want to talk about strategies for sustainable self-care. And when I say sustainable, what I really mean is how do we make self-care something we incorporate in our daily lives? So I'm much more about self-care as a philosophy, not just a bubble bath and a cup of tea. Having been through burnout myself a number of years ago, it was an opportunity for me to learn what self-care really means. And for me, it is a lot more than, like I said, a bubble bath and a cup of tea, even though those things are obviously nice and necessary sometimes too. The picture that I have on this slide here, some beautiful fish in an aquarium. What I really like you to be thinking about throughout the presentation today is the idea that we don't operate in isolation. We are always within some type of environment. So whether this is a workplace environment, if this is a family dynamic, if this is your home that you live in or community that you live in, there are aspects of the environment or the fish tank itself that are going to influence the fish that are in it, which is you, me, our friends, family, colleagues. So the environment itself, if the fish tank is dirty or there's unclear expectations, the fish don't have what they need to thrive, they're ultimately going to suffer. We could have the fish that is taking care of itself really well. It exercises, it goes to therapy, it has good social supports, it sets boundaries. But if it's put in a dirty fish tank or a dirty environment, it's ultimately not going to be able to meet its full potential. Vice versa is also true. So we could maybe have some individuals who are struggling with their mental health or self-care, but if we put them in a really healthy environment where the water is clear, it's the right temperature, they're given what they need, the other fish are friendly to them, they're ultimately going to thrive. So I see this as kind of a two-way street when we talk about mental health and stress management is what is the environment that's surrounding us? Is it set up for us to be living a life that feels aligned and well? And our personal responsibility to be doing the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. I think it's very easy to get drawn into caregiving or drawn into overworking or drawn into productivity as a status symbol. And we often have to recommit over and over to do things that help keep ourselves feeling well so that we can show up to the things that matter in life. So, the first thing I'd like you to think about, and if you want to pop something in the chat to me now, I would love that. What is your definition of mental health here? So, this definition comes from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and I like it for a few reasons. I'll tell you why as I read it to you. So, it says that mental health is the capacity of each and all of us. So, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. In fact, the longer I do this work, the less I know exactly where the line is between what's mental health and what's physical health, just because they're so intricately linked. So it's not something that's just happening to somebody else over there. It's something that we all manage. I think our awareness of our mental health is tends to be what changes from person to person, but it is something that all of us navigate day by day, sometimes even hour by hour. So the capacity of each and all of us to feel, think, and act. So our feelings and emotions and our thoughts and our behaviors are also intricately linked and interact with each other and influence each other in often complex ways that we're not always conscious of, in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with challenges we face. So, in this sense, positive mental health is not about whether or not you have a diagnosis or an illness, but about how are you managing the challenges that come up. Positive mental health is also not just having no challenges in life, even though that would be lovely, not necessarily doable or realistic. The second part of this definition says it's a positive sense of emotional and spiritual well being that respects the importance of culture, equity, social justice, interconnections, and personal dignity. And those big bolded words at the end there basically come together to form our worldview, how we see ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world, how we interact with other people and the spaces around us. So the thing that I love most about this definition is that it says nothing about either ill or healthy. And in fact, we know that mental health exists on a continuum. It's not just one or the other. So I'm going to present you the first tool that I think is really helpful, both individually, maybe also as a family or as a team, depending who you interact with on a regular basis. This can be a great thing to incorporate to start to open conversations about mental health. I always say secret support stigma. So the more we can talk about things and get them out in the open, the more we can dissolve any shame or embarrassment or fear that might be surrounding and really get people the support that they need. So if you were to Google mental health continuum, you would find a million different versions of what you're looking at on my screen right now. This one has a few components that I like. So we have, first of all, the color spectrum from green down through yellow, orange, and into red, if the colors speak to you. We've got the battery gauges, if that speaks to you, from kind of like full battery in the excelling and thriving and down to low battery or no battery when we're in crisis. We also have the labels here. So this says nothing about whether you're well, unwell, ill, healthy, but more about excelling, thriving, surviving, struggle in crisis to be a little bit of more neutral, less stigmatizing language. And the idea here is that we're always striving to be somewhere in the green. So this is where we can experience joy, curiosity, playfulness, flow. When I say flow, what I mean by that is the headspace you can be in, the thing you can do where you sit down to do it and you look up and it's 2 hours later and you have no idea where the time went. That state of being for our brains is very restorative. It allows our brains to do some processing that it can't otherwise do when we're in a stressed state. And it's generally enjoyable, usually, to be in a state of flow. Now, inevitably, things happen in life. I know many of you may be caregivers or may be dealing with chronic health concerns, cognitive concerns, whatever it might be. So we might find from time to time we move down into the yellow or the orange. And this is where we might start to notice some anxious thoughts, maybe lower mood, maybe difficulties sleeping, eating. If we don't pay attention to ourselves and our bodies and our minds when we're moving into the yellow or the orange, and maybe either intervene with some self-care or intervene with getting supports, it's likely that we continue on this trajectory down into the red. And this is where we might notice absenteeism. So maybe not showing up for social plans anymore, not showing up to work if you're employed, a sense of exhaustion physically and emotionally, very poor sleep, which usually looks like either having difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep, or oversleeping but still feeling unrested. We might see some weight loss or weight gain. So, as an individual tool, I love the mental health continuum for just a check in. Where am I at today? One of the strategies for self care that I try to work with my clients and in workshops to try to convey is managing not just our time, but also our energy. So, if we think of energy as a finite resource that we only have so much available to us in any given day, we need to be careful how we spend it and how we recharge it. For example, self care when you're in the red or the orange is probably focused on much more basic needs. Are you eating? Are you drinking water? Have you seen daylight? Have you moved your body a little bit? Versus self care when we're in the green can look a lot different, which might be planning an outing, being social, maybe doing some future planning about retirement, finances, trips, being able to get things done that often go by the wayside or don't get finished when life gets busy. So, on an individual level, assessing, within a day, within an hour, where am I at? What self care matches where I'm at? How could I bump myself up a level or two? How do I manage my energy today? I actually know someone who, in her agenda, she color codes different activities and tasks that she has to do. And she has rules about we can only have 3 red things in a day and they can never be back to back. They have to have a little palette cleanser green thing in the middle. So I think this is a really beautiful way to think about, yeah, we have a full 24 hours of time to spend, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have a full 24 hours of energy to spend on any given day, especially when we're dealing with weather, when we're dealing with holidays coming up, which can be stressful for a lot of people, health concerns, grief, lots of different things coming at us these days. As a team or as a family, I think this tool can be really helpful in helping people name in a non-judgmental way where they're at. In when I do this workshop in a workplace, I invite the teams to begin to practice just stating what color they feel like they're in today, and no reason necessary, but just so that everyone around them has an understanding that, if Joe is in the orange today, maybe he needs a little bit of space, or maybe he needs a little bit of extra support. Maybe there's something we can take off his plate. If Susie's in the green today, maybe it's a good time to assign a little bit of work or have her do some out of the ordinary tasks she might have a little extra energy for. So that's the mental health continuum. I'm curious to hear for us to talk about some warning signs. If anybody feels comfortable, again, I'll invite you to pop in the chat if you have it available to you. What tells you that you're starting to trend towards the orange or the red? How do you know in your body? How do you know in your mind? Again, if you don't want to answer in the chat, I'll give you a moment to just reflect to yourself on what this might look like for you. Warning signs that indicate you might be kind of slipping down the continuum or maybe need to pay attention to. So there are some unique. I mean, there are some unique ones to each of us. There are some common ones as well. In general, when we're talking about warning signs, we really want to watch for changes and patterns. So, for example, if you used to be a really solid sleeper and lately it's been difficult getting to sleep or staying asleep, and it's become a pattern over the course of days or weeks, we really want to pay attention to that. Let's say you're usually a pretty solid sleeper and the last few nights has been hard because you know you have a big presentation coming up, or you know you have a doctor's appointment that you're feeling a bit nervous about to get test results for something. That's not necessarily a pattern. We know that after that event happens, likely your sleep goes back to the way that it used to be. Changes could be a change in appetite. Some people eat more, some people eat less. I always say I'm a little bit envious of the folks who eat less when they're stressed because my body always wants more when I'm stressed. So we kind of need to know our own baselines, which means not just warning signs, but also how do we know we feel well in our bodies? What does our green baseline feel like? And for a lot of us dealing with chronic stress or living in stressful situations for a long time, we can often lose sight of what that ever felt like or what it could feel like again. But I invite you to think about that for yourself, how your body feels, what thoughts you have, how your emotions process or come up for you when you're in the green, not just in the red. So we'll look at some common ones. This is just to normalize that if any of these show up for you in your life, it might be a sign that you maybe want to pay attention to how you're taking care of yourself. I hope you feel seen, but not necessarily called out. If you notice that you find yourself in this list, just take it as a sign that maybe some compassionate care is needed. We've already talked about energy. There is a theory that I really love that I'll present to you. Maybe you've heard it before, called the spoon theory. And spoon theory initially was developed to describe energy as it relates to individuals living with chronic health concerns or disabilities. But we can also apply it to mental health. And so spoon theory says we all wake up with a certain amount of energy in a day, denoted by the unit of a spoon. So let's say on a good day, you're in the green, you wake up with 20 spoons of energy, and that everything you do during the day costs you some spoon. So maybe getting up, getting yourself ready for whatever's going on today costs you two or three. Showing up to your appointments, to work, to family obligations takes you another 9 or 10. And then you've got some left at the end of the day to do whatever you like to do. Spoon theory also says, though, that when we're struggling, more in the orange or the red, not only do we wake up with less energy, less spoons, so maybe 10 instead of 20, but everything we do costs more. So getting up on a red day and getting yourself ready for your day maybe takes 5 or 6. And showing up for your day maybe takes 20 itself. And then by the end of the day, we're in a deficit. So I really like to conceptualize that it's not only just a lack of energy, but also that the energy, the things that we're doing, the energy that we're spending is the cost is often more for the same things that we usually do. We might notice some withdrawing and avoiding. So I'm going to put out there something that I don't think any of you will find surprising, which is that human beings are not really great at feeling out of control. I think we all have a different tolerance level for how much uncertainty we'll tolerate in our lives. Typically, what we see is when life feels too out of control, there's just too many balls in the air that we can't catch them all. We usually see someone close the circle on what they're interacting with and do some withdrawal. And this is the brain's way of trying to get back in control of a smaller number of things. It can be protective, it can be adaptive in a short term. We see this maybe especially after a loss while somebody's grieving. There's going to be a period of withdrawal while they integrate this loss into their identity. Over time, what we hope is that they regain a sense of stability in their life and reopen the circle to include social interactions, maybe personal hygiene, initiating plans, tasks around the house. The challenge here is that when somebody stays withdrawn or isolated over a long period of time, it can really create damage to their relationships and support networks, which leaves them isolated longer term, which contributes to further maybe stress, isolation, loneliness. We might notice overly emotional responses to typical tasks. So let's say somebody asks you to do something that you've done a million times, and today you snap at them, or today you start crying. I had a man in a workshop a couple years ago. It was around this time of year before Christmas, and he said that he knew he needed to take a break because he found himself crying at a McDonald's commercial one evening. And he thought, okay, I think that's probably an overly emotional response to something that should not provoke that big of a response. We might notice increased consumption of carbs, sugar, coffee, alcohol, other substances. These are all ways that our bodies try to get us energy when we feel a lack or disconnection when we feel overwhelmed. Drugs and alcohol are going to numb out. They're going to help us forget. They're going to help us distance ourselves from overwhelm. Carbs, sugar, coffee is going to try to give us some maybe like counterfeit energy or really not sustainable energy bursts up and down, but it is natural that we crave these things and use these things as a way of coping when we're feeling unwell. Not that they're the best, most adaptive coping strategies, but they happen. We might notice numbness. So, I mentioned to you earlier, having dealt with burnout in my life a number of years ago, this was it for me. So, I remember I could be surrounded by people who loved and cared about me, and I would just feel, I know I should be feeling happy right now. I just don't feel anything. Somebody would be telling me something really awful, and I'd be thinking, oh, I should be feeling sad for them, but I just feel, eh. And that's a scary place to be. Our brains do this numbing to help us when we're overwhelmed. Brain says like, "Oh, we can't deal with this right now. Let's just shut it down." The problem is when we can't switch it back on. And the other problem is when we switch off not only uncomfortable stuff, but also joy, pleasure, love, connection, and then we're not feeling any of it. Might notice someone feeling helpless or hopeless if you start to feel that things are out of your control and you can't actually do things that you want to be able to do in your life, or that it seems like nothing is working. And it feels like all the energy that you're expending is just, you're just on a never ending hamster wheel. That can be quite discouraging. We might notice increasingly disorganized surroundings. So I always think that again, going back to our fish tank, our environments are often reflections of our internal environments as well. I know we probably all have different standards of cleanliness that we hold ourselves to when it comes to our homes, and places that we live. And yet, certainly, I know that when I'm closer to the red or the orange, the dishes are going to sit in the sink a little bit longer. The laundry's going to take longer to come back upstairs. It's going to be harder for me to find things that get misplaced as I'm rushing or hustling around. So this is a really, for me at least, a sign to maybe slow down and be more mindful and check in with myself when I notice that my environment is becoming a little bit chaotic. And really, really common, I hear this a lot, difficulty focusing and concentrating. So brain is just not able to do the tasks we're asking it to do. Finding brain is jumping around from topic to topic, and having a hard time really like sitting with anything for any period of time. So we'll talk a little bit about quickly burnout and stress, and then we'll move forward into the second half of some self-care strategies to combat all of this. So burnout, we can think of as the absolute red end of the continuum, where somebody's in crisis mode, empty battery. There is a state of complete emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion, which also can show up as depersonalization or detachment. So maybe developing a cynical attitude, feeling disconnected from others, feeling disconnected from your work, feeling like you really don't care about what happens to you or to anybody else around you. Also, a reduced sense of accomplishment. So, like I said, with that hamster wheel, feeling ineffective, feeling unproductive, feeling like whatever efforts you're putting forward are just not making a difference. Burnout is not the same as too much stress, but it can occur after exposure to prolonged stress. So, ideally, our bodies like to launch a stress response, figure out some kind of problem solving, and come back down to baseline relatively quickly. What can happen in today's world is we launch a stress response, and then there's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another one. And our bodies are just continually reacting to news that we're consuming, to parenting young children, to caregiving for aging parents, to work stress, to financial stress, to holiday stress. And our bodies never have a chance to actually come back down to baseline. They're just constantly in reaction mode, which can lead to burnout over time. Anyone can experience burnout. So we often hear it. We hear about it in frontline work, healthcare professionals, but this can happen. Caregiver burnout is a thing. This can happen for people who are not in the workforce. And there's a few factors that lead to this. So maybe see if you see yourself in any of these factors leading to burnout in a personal sense. Excessive responsibility. So maybe caring for multiple family members or dependents, managing household duties without adequate support. A sense of a lack of personal control. So feeling unable to make decisions about your own time or priorities, being unable to set boundaries with family, friends, or other obligations. A lack of recognition or appreciation. So feeling like your efforts in relationships are maybe being taken advantage of or taken for granted. Maybe minimal acknowledgement from family or social circles for the contributions that you are making. Unsupportive or toxic relationships. So, chronic conflict with a partner or within a family, with a close friend, feeling consistently emotionally drained by interactions with certain people. I call these people energy vampires. It's the people you spend time with that just suck it right out of you. And when we are surrounded by energy vampires constantly, it's just flowing out. It's never coming back in. And I truly believe that healthy supportive relationships help us refill that energy. You can talk about challenging things, you can have vulnerable conversations, and yet you still leave feeling a little more topped up than you did when you went in. If there's lifestyle imbalance happening, so for having poor sleep, irregular meals, insufficient exercise, lack of time for hobbies or relaxation. If there's an emotional overload going on, so we're maybe carrying unresolved grief or trauma or ongoing stress, constantly prioritizing other people's needs over our own. We're going through some life transitions, maybe a divorce, maybe moving, maybe retirement, maybe a change in family structure with introduction of a new baby or grandchild, or a child moving out or going to school. And maybe financial stress, debt, budgeting pressures, instability in income, life just being generally more expensive these days. All these things are contributing to the stress leading to some potential burnout. So, really quickly, let's talk about the stress response. We know that there are kind of two threats to our safety. Our nervous systems, our minds, our bodies are constantly on the lookout for things in our environment that might be posing a threat to us physically, but also psychologically. Acute threats are often shorter lasting, they're more easily defined, and they happen and then they're over. So for example, I'm crossing the street, I see a car's coming, I'm going to stop, let the car pass, and then I'm back to safety again. Versus more chronic threats to safety, which are longer lasting. So these might be caregiving for a family member in decline, where it's a little bit harder to define. It doesn't have a clear end date. There's a lot of factors that are out of our control, and there's not really a definable problem solving or solution that is easy to come to. We're kind of just stuck in the grayness. What happens when our bodies detect these threats to safety is what's called an acute stress response. So there's a theory that I really like that describes this really well, which is when we're in a stress response. So if you imagine that my fist here on the screen represents my brain, we've got frontal lobe up here behind the forehead, responsible for reasoning, critical thinking, problem solving. When we're in a stress response, we do what this model calls flipping the lid. And by the way, I got to say, our brains don't actually flip open like this. I know I had someone in a workshop who said her kid learned this in school and was horrified to think her brain was flipping over in her skull. Doesn't actually happen, but for the model's sake, we imagine that we sense a threat, we lose that lid. Now we're in here, which we really only have fight, flight, freeze available to us. This is amygdala. This is emotional reptilian brain. So fight mode means we maybe like get bigger, we get louder, we get angry, we start repeating ourselves, we start tearing around the house, putting stuff away or slamming stuff shut. Flight mode is we get smaller, we withdraw, we go inward, we get quieter, we avoid. Freeze mode is that moment, you've probably experienced this at some point, where everything just disappears. You don't know what to do or how to move forward. It's kind of like a state of shock. So there is such a thing as positive stress. Positive stress, if we didn't have any stress in our life, probably nothing would ever get done. So if you're working, if you didn't feel some stress to make a paycheck to support yourself and your family, you might not show up to work on the hard days. If we never had deadlines, work might just go on indefinitely. If we knew the end to every book or movie we ever read or watched, it might not be that fun to even start it. There is a tipping point, though, when the stress overreaches our ability to manage it, and then we're going to see a real decrease in energy, productivity, all the warning signs it painted for you earlier. So I just want to normalize some really natural reactions to stress. These things don't actually, they feel like they help us manage stress, but they're actually maybe creating even more. Talk about these and then we'll switch into talking about more adaptive strategies. So the first one is worrying. Brains that like to play out all the what ifs. Well, what if this happens? What if this conversation goes this way? What if that falls through? Our brain is trying to get a sense of control, thinking if I worry through all the options, no matter what happens, I'll be prepared. Worrying doesn't actually change the future. It just steals our present moment. It does nothing productive to um, help us in any way, but it is the brain's natural attempt at trying to regain a sense of predictability, consistency. Might be some over analyzing happening. This is usually focused more on the past. So maybe we're ruminating about conversations we had. Maybe we're rethinking the day over and over again and being critical about things that didn't go the way that we wanted them to. Again, this is the brain's way of trying to get a sense of control, trying to make sure we feel like we belong, that we're accepted, that we're worthy. Again, doesn't actually give us those feelings, kind of just restarts the stress response over again. We can see people seeking excessive reassurance. So maybe instead of trusting your inner knowing or going inside to make a decision based on your values, you are collecting opinions from everybody in your life to tell you what you should do next or how you should respond. Double or triple checking your calendar, um, things around the house, stuff that you've packed, emails that you've sent. Again, it's a way of trying to feel a sense of stability and security and knowing that you've secured what you need to today. A refusal to delegate. We can see this in a workplace. We can see this in family dynamics as well. This is a wanting to hold on to a sense of control and feeling that it's vulnerable to let somebody else take something off our plate, which, even though that might feel like a relief, feels anxiety inducing when we think about not having control over something anymore. Procrastinating and avoiding people, places, activities that just feel like they suck more energy than they're worth right now, or that we don't have the energy for. And also a distraction by busyness. Sometimes we have a tendency to just make ourselves so busy that we're running, hustling all the time. We never have a chance to actually sit down and feel how we're really feeling. And unfortunately, our bodies will eventually stop us in the form of headaches, migraines, all kinds of things can show up in our bodies when we're not listening to them to force us to slow down when we're not listening, when we're pushing ourselves too hard. So let's talk about what we can do that is actually helpful. If you see yourself in any of these natural responses, totally natural, totally normal, Maybe they are things that you would like to not spend so much time engaging anymore. Let's talk about what we can do instead. I have a few quotes for you that I like, that I carry with me in my work and in my life. And the first one says, self-care allows you to give the world the best of you, not just what's left of you. I know that when I'm not taking care of myself and I'm showing up half to my friends, to my family, to my clients, it's really not a great feeling. I don't feel like I'm giving them the best version of me that they deserve and that I want to give them. Maybe I'm more irritable. Maybe I'm not as present. So self-care is what's really allows us to show up more fully. The next one says that the best other care we can do is to care for ourselves first, so we're not putting those we care about in a place where we come to resent them. Resentment shows up when we're overstretched and our boundaries are being crossed. And I often hear this, especially from caregivers, especially from people who maybe have children, spouses, houses, jobs to take care of. Well, how can I take care of myself when there's so many other demands? All of these other people and things need me. And the truth is that taking care of ourselves means you can take care of all of those other things. So, for example, in my job as a therapist, my primary job at work is to show up for people and be present and be emotionally attuned and offer strategies, help them process tough stuff. But my secondary job is to be taking care of myself when I'm not at work. So if I'm not eating well or not exercising or not seeking my own supports, taking care of myself, I can't actually show up and do that work that I need to do. So I see my self-care as part of my job, not something that's instead of my job. This one says if we don't make time for wellness, we'll be forced to take time for illness. You know this when you finally get some time off or finally take a vacation and you end up sick because your immune system crashes after being in stress for so long. I would much rather plan an hour or an afternoon or a day to give time to myself to do something I enjoy than be forced to take a sick day and have to cancel a bunch of things, and then really just kind of rest and recover and not be able to do much else. So if you're thinking that this is hard, I don't have time for self-care, I don't know where I would fit it in. It feels like one more thing on top of everything else I'm responsible for. I get that. Self-care feels hard because we often put ourselves last. Because we are busy, there are generally a lot of demands on our time and energy in this life, in this society, in our families, in our communities. We often can feel guilty or selfish. Um, I can't remember. I think maybe this quote is about to come up on the next slide, but I'll say it here anyway. Self-care is taking what we need. Selfish is taking more than you need. So we're not, maybe we've been raised that we put other people first or that we need to be team players. And those are great values to have. At the same time, taking care of yourself is something that hardly anybody else can do for you. Um, and I think people who feel guilty do have that just tells me you have some good values about being consistent for showing up for your friends and family, that you care about people around you, that you want to be reliable, that you want to be trustworthy. And that, again, I encourage you to think about maybe self-care being the vehicle to get you there, not a threat to those things. Self-care is also hard because it can be seen as pampering or an indulgence when it's actually a daily necessity. So I'm not talking about going to the spa every day, although that is a nice pampering indulgence from time to time. I think we live in a society that would sell us products and classes and workshops and experiences that tell us you'll feel better if you have this thing in your life. And to me, true self-care doesn't actually require that we spend money on anything or that we need anything to do it. That is more maybe like some consumerism than actual self-care. So don't be convinced that it's pampering or indulgent. It really is something that we need to be doing day by day. Here's the quote. Self-care again, taking what we need, selfish, taking more than you need. So let's talk about self-care as a philosophy, not just a bubble bath. There's a couple mindset shifts I will propose to you. You can take or leave what works for you. The first one is, what would it be like in your life to be a strainer, not a sponge? So sponges are people who soak in everything from other people. They feel other people's feelings. They take other people's pain. They soak it in and they hold on to it and they carry it around. Those are beautiful qualities to have, and I think our world needs more empathy. At the same time, that gets so heavy to carry and might not be even your responsibility or job to do. And so, strainers, on the other hand, if you think of a strainer, are going to let a lot flow through them. Things that they don't maybe shouldn't be taking personally, responsibilities that are not actually their job. They're going to focus on the nuggets that are left, the things that they're actually in control of, the things that they can do something about. That's the first mindset shift. The next one I'll propose to you is what I like to call name it to tame it. So, this is the idea that when we name something that's happening to us, then we can do something about it. So, like, ooh, okay, I'm noticing my neck and shoulders are telling me they're really tense. I've got a little headache brewing. What's going on right now? Oh yeah, I skipped my lunch break today. Or, oh yeah, I haven't actually gone outside at all today. Or, ooh, I haven't eaten since 7 a.m. this morning. So I get to name what's going on so I can now get back in control of it. Works with feelings and emotions too. So, okay, I'm feeling anger, and that anger is telling me that this person is asking me to do something I actually don't really want to do right now, but I feel pressure to say yes. Okay, once I name that, then I can make a conscious decision about how I want to manage that going forward. Another quote that I really like, seems maybe a little bit silly, but I love the message behind it, is that we need to treat our mental health like our dental health. So if I said to you, oh, you know what? I actually don't need to brush my teeth twice a day for 2 minutes because I do it for half an hour on Sundays. You would probably think that's ill-advised, not exactly the way dental health works. It's not really the way mental health works either. So maybe you have a day off or weekends, or there's a certain time in the week where you get a little more space to yourself, and that's when you can go for the hike or the walk in nature. Or that's when you can spend some time reading your favorite book, or spend some time making some comfort food that's not just convenient, but is also nutritious and takes a bit more time to prepare. And that's lovely. At the same time, doing small things every day, even just for a few minutes, can be what helps us just get by, maybe keeps us in the yellow from slipping down into the orange or the red. So let's look at some strategies. You can pick and choose the ones that work for you. If I put this list up and you feel like, oh, this would be really hard, maybe check in with yourself and see if there's some experiments you could try, or some things, some resistance coming up that you want to lean into a little bit, that's maybe telling you this is an area that would be important for you to focus on. So first one is knowing your limits. And this is checking in with, how many spoons did I wake up with this morning? This is checking in, where am I at on the continuum today? So that we can set some proactive boundaries versus, now I've taken on too much, my line was way back there and I'm in the thick of it now. So we want to set boundaries as we're approaching those limits, not after they've already been crossed. First things first, which means, are you eating? Um, have you showered? Have you seen daylight or gotten fresh air today? There's a picture on the internet that I saw once that said fresh air, water, and sunshine, because we're all basically houseplants with complicated emotions. Thought that was really sweet. So when all else fails and you can't figure life out, or it just seems like nothing's working, bringing it right back to the basics. We want to decompress throughout the day. So if you think of your capacity for a day kind of like a balloon, maybe your balloon is really big. You can fit a lot in there before it pops. And that would be maybe being in the green. If you're in the red and your balloon is really small, it doesn't take a lot of hot air in there for that thing to explode. So we want to give this a chance to expend some throughout the day so that you're not just blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. So this might be taking breaks throughout the day. Even just taking 5 deep breaths, 60 seconds of deep breathing is enough to get fresh oxygen to our brain to reset a positive mood. It might be if you're able to move around your place, even if you're not able to get outside, maybe shifting rooms, having conversations, letting people know before this bubble's over that maybe there's something going on. Whatever we can do to just leak a little bit of that out and leave some room in the balloon for things that you would like to do or that bring you some joy or pleasure or playfulness or fun. Engaging in self-reflection. I like to do this, in the morning as you're waking up. How do I feel today? What do I need today? Who could I reach out to today? And maybe in the evening, what went well today? How did I show up for myself today? What do I need to make tomorrow a success? So not necessarily focused on being critical of ourselves, but really reflecting on what your needs are, what your wants are, where your body and mind are at. Making a serious effort, which basically means we can't invest money that we don't already have in our bank account, right? So we can't invest in self-care if we don't make the time in our calendars. So maybe blocking even just half an hour in your day, that treating that like you would an appointment with a specialist that you've been waiting 6 months to have, and prioritizing time with self as much as we prioritize time with other people. Maybe you make an effort to go to the gym, but if you get a better offer or somebody else needs you, that's the first thing that goes. Maybe rethinking about what the priorities are and how you can still fit that gym time in while maybe also attending to the people around you. Considering transition rituals, so maybe after a period of caregiving, maybe after work, something that you do that kind of transitions you out of helper carer mode and into your personal life. So whether this is having a shower and imagining washing the day off, whether it's sitting, I have a friend who does what she calls two-handed tea drinking. So she says she's guilty of making a cup of tea, taking 2 sips, putting it down, and then getting so busy she forgets about it. And her transition ritual is sitting down with 2 hands on the cup, which means she's not scrolling, she's not working, she's not cleaning, she's just having a moment with her tea. Extending some self-compassion, so being kinder to ourselves, acknowledging that we're all doing the best we can with what we have at any given moment. Practicing gratitude, which helps rewire our brains to look out for the positives, not just the negatives. So yeah, today might have been a really crappy day. Was there one small glimmer of anything that you can hold on to today that maybe can just change how you're feeling in that moment and start to have you look out for the things that go well or the things that work out or the things that feel good, not just the hard, uncomfortable things in life. And ultimately, asking for help when you need it. Couple more really quick strategies. I'm mindful of the time. I do want to give a few moments for Q&A, so I assure you I'm about to wrap up. These are kind of in counter to that slide that we had with the worrying, overanalyzing, refusing to delegate. So accomplishing something. When it feels like you're on that hamster wheel, can you wash one dish? Can you make the bed? Can you put one thing away that might just help this snowball into feeling motivated or energized or more in control? Focusing on what we can control and letting go of what we can't, which I know is way easier said than done. Reminding yourself you cannot control other people and bringing it back to what's within your ability to make decisions about. Following a sense of routine can give us some consistency in our day. And when we put self-care in our routines, we don't have to find a time for it to happen because we know that it just happens. So for example, walking my dog is part of my morning routine. It's self-care for me and for him, gets us outside, gets us moving, sets myself up for the day ahead. I know that it's just a part of my morning routine. And so I don't have to think about when that's going to happen or plan for it or change anything around. Want to limit news consumption. The news is often activating stress responses because it's often negative and it's often happening in places that we can't do anything about anyway. So it can leave us feeling quite powerless and helpless. I had a woman in a workshop once say that she constantly had the news on in the background, no matter what she was doing. And she did an experiment where she turned that to a different channel of just like neutral music. And she found that it really impacted her mood and her energy. She didn't realize the toll it was taking to have a constant stream of negative, horrific, awful stuff happening, even if she wasn't fully paying attention to it. We want to prioritize connection. So if we're noticing that we're tending to withdraw or avoid, seeking out people that do fill you up, that do leave you feeling a little lighter than when you came, can be helpful in, I mean, ultimately, human beings, we need socialization, we need connection. I think we all have a different level. Our social batteries are different, but ultimately, it is something then that can help pick us up. Give your brain a boost. So whether this is giving yourself some endorphins by moving your body, finding something to laugh about, singing, dancing, all of these things give us endorphins, which can just set our brains up for being in a positive mood. And this one sounds maybe silly at face value, but works for a lot of people. If you are a worrier, scheduling that worry time. So let's say worry time is going to be at 3 o'clock for 10 minutes. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to set a timer, I'm going to let my brain do all the worrying it wants to do. And when that timer goes off, I'm going to get up and move to another space. And that's worry time for today. This means that as you're going about your day, if your brain pops up with things like, oh, we got to worry about what we're buying so and so for Christmas, or oh, we got to worry about RSVPing to that party, or oh, we got to worry about picking this up for mom or dad after work today, we can say to brain, oh, okay, thank you. Right now, I am doing X. Worry time's at 3 o'clock. You can give me all your reminders then. And it helps to maybe contain it so that it doesn't slime over all of your day and all of your activities. All right, if we've got any readers in the group, these are some book recommendations. If you want to read more about kind of the snapshots I've given you here today, we got a book called Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. They are sisters. Lovely book, particularly helpful for women, I find, but I know men can benefit from it as well. Kristen Neff has got two books about self-compassion. They're beautiful books. The first one's called Self-Compassion, and the second one's called Fierce Self-Compassion. There's a book by Pooja Lakshman. She's an MD. It's called Real Self-Care. Talks about kind of what I talked about not needing products or experiences to have self-care. Some resources. One of my colleagues' website. She's a therapist who specializes in burnout and self-care. We also did a podcast episode a little while ago if you want to check that out. And I will just close off with a big thank you. Thank you to Victoria for inviting me here. I don't know if my friend Emma is in the crowd, but I'll shout out to her for connecting me to Victoria in the first place. Thank you to all of you that came and spent this time with me. I hope you found the hour to be valuable and worthwhile. If you want my contact information, you can reach me here. And I know I haven't left a whole lot of time for Q&A. I'm happy to stay on for a couple minutes if folks need to. If you need to wrap up and log off, please do. And I'll pass over to Victoria to take it from here.
Thank you so much, Breanna. That was such a informative presentation. I'm sure everybody really got a lot from it. And I'm sure there will be some questions. I see a hand raised. I just want to remind everyone that unfortunately, you do not have access to your mic or to video. So if you have any questions, please write these in the chat, and that way Breanna can have a chance to respond. Possible.
Do you have any questions, Victoria?
I thought it was great. It was really well-rounded in terms of explaining, the basics of mental health and then signs to recognize being stressed, because I do feel like a lot of people will feel stress in their bodies and maybe not necessarily recognize it. So I thought that was very helpful. I suppose a question would be in terms of, healthy aging, which is very relevant to our clinic. Do you have any examples of what chronic stress can do to someone, in the long term and not necessarily just in the short term?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, over time, we know the research shows that stress really can accelerate conditions with heart, blood pressure, um, digestion, like all areas of the body. So we definitely want to be watching out for like how are we managing stress? How is our body telling us to slow down, make changes, and maybe self-care changes as you age as well too, right? Maybe you're not able to do the same things you used to be able to do, and so we have to be kind of creative about ensuring that we find ways to still take care of ourselves in ways that we're able to, even if that doesn't look the same as it used to, not giving up entirely.
That's so great. Um, we're very interested in healthy aging here, and stress can, of course, as peer presentation, have so many impacts on our life, as we're experiencing it, but also in the long term, which is so important to remember. I do see a question here. Where do we find this recording? All of our presentations, all of our Thursday chats can be found on our website. So if you go to thememoryclinic.ca, that's our website, and they can all be found. I'll find it for you. So under our news tab in our website, you can see all of our events that we are a part of at the Memory Clinic. And then there's also a Thursday Chats tab. And you can see every single Thursday chat that we've ever done in the catch-up section. And all of the recordings will be found there. See another question here, Breanna. Stress and dementia, what's the research saying? Do you have anything to add for that?
It's not my area of expertise, so don't want to give people information that's not true. I'm sure though, Victoria, does your clinic have resources for people wondering about that?
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of different research out there, so I just want everyone to be aware that, just because one article was published doesn't mean that's necessarily the case. There's also a lot of sometimes fear mongering surrounding neurodegenerative disorders and what can cause them. So to just take everything with a grain of salt. Um, but as was mentioned in Brianna's presentation, stress can affect so many aspects of our lives, including diet, sleep, socialization, and all of these things can also be linked to risk factors for developing any type of neurodegenerative disorder. So it's just important to keep in mind that a lot of things in our lives are very connected. Um, if you're interested in having any, specific research, it's not necessarily my area of expertise, but you can always reach out to us, and I'm sure someone on our team, whether it be one of our nurses or one of our doctors, would be happy to find some specific articles for you to reference.
Right.
I'm assuming this question is for you, Brianna. Do you do consulting?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I know that sometimes that can if somebody means therapy by that. So I do. I also do consulting, more in a workplace context around psychological health and safety in the workplace. I've worked with managers, directors who want to better support their teams. And yes, I also do psychotherapy. I know, I think the French word for therapy is consultation. So maybe that's so yes to both, whatever the context is.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions that we have for today. Again, thank you so much, Brianna. It was so
Mm.
helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Victoria, and for being here.
Of course. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.